All right, Celina Shands, thanks for being on the show.
It's such a pleasure, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Of course, for our listeners, why don't you tell us who you are, your story?
Okay, well, I'll do the Reader's Digest version because
Yeah.
we could be here for weeks. But I always start off by saying my accent is from North Carolina, and I've lived in the Bay Area in California and in San Diego for the past 30 years. And it was a story just getting out here growing up in the South. But during the course of my career, I've had three companies. I've sold one of them and have my current company, which has been a virtual business model for 21 years. So
Mm.
when COVID hit, it was like, oh, great, people are now getting onto Zoom and things of that nature. But we have what I really love about what we do here is we have a national footprint and help those organizations that are in workforce education and entrepreneurship. So those are the sectors where we work. And their missions really inspire me because they help underserved and underrepresented populations get workforce training and education to elevate them and to lift them up to a different place. So, just by virtue of working with these folks and marketing and communications and recruiting them, we're able to really hear all their wonderful stories about how these lives are impacted through the right training. Because not everybody is cut out
Mm.
for a 4-year university, nor do they have the resources. Yet there are a lot of options out there for folks. So that's the work I get to do every single day, and I always say if I have to sum it up in one word, it really is about empowering people.
Wow. And tell me more about how you came to that type of service and how you work.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started out to get out. Well, if I back up a little bit and go back to North Carolina, I basically was trying to get out of my alcoholic family. And
Mm.
to do that, to stay out of the house where it was safe, I got into sports. And so I played everything in school and was able to get a scholarship to play basketball. So sports have sort of always been my first love for many reasons. And my first company, I came to California to study holistic health, to get a master's in sports medicine, and my first company was called Life at its Peak, and it was a consulting company that helped doctors integrate sports medicine as part of their practice.
Mm.
And so that it was completely different from what I'm doing now. But
Sure.
managed care hit, right, and like so many entrepreneurs, you have to kind of pivot. It's like success or what you want to do in life is never, I don't think, a linear path. It's just like, oh, this
Mm.
piece now, looking back, I see how it got me to this part of my life. And so I was getting a little tired of living in the Bay Area and ended up going to San Diego and taking a job building my skills in working with the news media. So it was around the county of Health and Human Services, which was fantastic because I got to do a lot of campaigns like shaken baby syndrome, E. coli. And
Mm.
it was during that time that I wrote a business plan for San Pasqual Academy, which is still here in San Diego. It's a foster youth facility. And the person that sat on one of the boards for that said, "Hey, I'd really like for you to come and work for us." And they were a workforce development board, which I'd never heard of. Apparently, there are
Mm.
600 of them all across the country, and they help with education and training. And when I thought about the mission, I thought, wow, this is really fantastic mission to help people really find their path. What are they passionate about? And so I just fell in love with it. I stayed there for 4 years at that organization and then launched a company that specializes in workforce education and entrepreneurship. So it was not a linear path by any means,
Sure.
Sam.
No, it sounds very interesting to, as I understand it, I've seen much more of this scenario where an entrepreneur will gain traction, start being successful, and they'll think to themselves, oh, I need to have a more tax advantaged way of handling my money. So I'm going to start a charity organization so I can
Mhm,
be
mhm,
more
right.
strategic with my profits. But what it's sounding like for you is that there is a much more natural blend between what I see as these public services and your entrepreneurial bent.
Absolutely. Yes. So everyone in our company really understands that mission. And I think that's why we've been successful year over year. We've been, around for 21 years. Um, and I think several reasons for that success. One, they understand that mission and they're passionate about it. So they understand the connection of the work we do in marketing and communications and how that attracts the right people to these organizations to help them. Secondly, many of the underserved and underrepresented populations that we're trying to attract to these programs, we are living cases of that. If I look at my
Mm.
team, I've had people who have been homeless. I've had people on my team who are immigrants, and I call us the underdogs, but not in a derogatory way. It's just we've had to really overcome some challenges to get to where we are. And they're all very successful human beings that really understand this market. So I think that's another level of our success is just living that mission, having been there.
Sure. What are some real life examples of the change you've been able to help create in other people's lives?
Sure. So there's an organization that we work with, the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and we started a campaign with them called hashtag Move Ahead with Adult Ed. And we can
Mm.
post that link for your viewers because if people are interested in this, they can go and locate an adult education provider in their area for low or no cost training. Maybe they want to improve their skills. So that's been a wonderful campaign. And one of the stories that floated up from that was about a woman who was homeless, who lived in a shelter, lived in not even a homeless shelter, it was a storage unit that she was living in.
Wow.
She didn't have a laptop. She was trying to get her high school equivalency diploma. And the instructor said, I'm going to partner with some of my private sector organizations that I know. We're going to get you a laptop. She was able to complete that and then go on to get what we call stackable credentials, where she's learning different
Mm.
skills. She's now making $60,000 a year. So think about that. It's like her path wasn't, it was whatever her hardships were, she was able to get out of that situation. And we hear these stories all the time about how the right skill set can empower someone to go and find their passion, get a great job, find a career pathway. So
Mm.
there's so many stories like that, and it uplifts us here at our company when we hear them and we get to promote them. It's like, wow.
Mm.
I'll sit in my office sometime. We'll be doing videos of these folks, and I'm like crying because it's like it's just so wonderful to
Yeah.
see their journey, right? And so most people don't know about these different pathways. They can find them in through adult education providers. They can adult schools are out there, community colleges. There are a lot of different ways to get the skills you want in order to make your life better.
My mind is going every which way because I've been the beneficiary of such things. I mean, my my mom in particular, she drove public school bus for us when we were little kids to help, get by. And by the time my youngest sibling was in school full time, she then went back to study and now she is a nurse, which she's loving every bit of that, helping out the preemies in the NICU. She just loves saving little babies all the time. But being able to pursue education as an adult, to reskill or to just upskill who you are and what you can provide, I think it's so inspiring in so many ways. And in fact, when I was pursuing my MBA, they called it the executive MBA track, but what it meant was night school. It was it was
Right.
night school with other mid career professionals, and getting access to that kind of stuff is so valuable because we at the Courage Coach for Executives, we are strengths based, values based, and being able to play to your strengths is not, there's some intuition to it. People have an inkling of what they're good at, but being able to explore it more deeply and then line up how you give value to your employer, your community, that that takes a bit of help sometimes. And this is leading me to the question, you've used the term pivotal people when you talk
Mm.
about mentors and mentorship.
Mhm.
So tell me about who's mentored you.
Well, so many people. I mean, the
Mm,
list is so long. And I think, when folks come from broken families or barriers in their childhood, you have to be a little creative in finding your own family, right? So, family in the traditional sense is one word. I've always been very fortunate and number one, my first mentor was my older sister who
mm,
basically raised me. She got her worker's permit at age 15 years old so that I could have the basics in life like food, clothing. She even got me into a private school for education through my athletic prowess. So she was very resourceful. She would tell me consistently, you can always be whatever you want to be. And I didn't believe that, but she did. So it's always finding those people who believe in you. She led by example. So she started her own company. So I had this living, breathing role model of an entrepreneur who said, we're getting out of this situation and we're going to make something of ourselves, right? So that she's in my address book as Shiro's sister because she's just amazing. And so she was my first mentor. And then my best friend Sharon back in North Carolina, she was also my teammate on different sports, but her family also raised me. We would crop tobacco as teenagers and young kids and make money, in the summertime. So that was a wonderful experience. And then just moving on, I always like ask for help. It's like I was curious. And it's like, I need help with this. I'm not understanding it. So either through my coaches, my teammates, other folks like that who are willing to sit down and spend time with me and talk. That's why I think mentorship is just so critical. It is so critical that we do it in our own way and find a way to give back because if someone takes the time and sits down and talks with you about your company or who you are personally, which I personally think they're intertwined. I don't think you can get away from separating who you are as a person and who you are in business. I think they're all intertwined. And I know people say, oh, it's just business, but to me, it's more than that, right? Especially if it's mission driven. So I've just been really blessed in that way. Like when I was in the sports medicine arena, we were doing a rehab facility up in Danville, California, and the program we were developing was so good. And I've always been keen on replicating and scaling. Like, how do we get this information out to people? I wanted to write a book, just self publish it on what we were doing at the clinic, so other doctors could like model that, but of course I didn't have any money. I was getting my master's degree at the time. So the clinic director, Dr. Greg Call, and he's still in practice after 40 years, he's just going strong. He said, well, why don't you write a book and self-publish it? And I said, okay, but that's going to take some money. And he goes to his office, he writes a check, hands me a blank check signed, and he said, just pay me back when the book sales come in. I believe it.
wow.
So, man, talk about, I mean, just like mind blowing, right? Mind
Mm,
blowing. So, I've just been very fortunate to find those people who are my family and believe in me. And I feel very strongly we need to give that back.
I love everything you said. When you talked about asking for help,
Hmm.
that reminded me of a book my wife Miranda and I had read. Is a book called Why Gender Matters, and as a, a researcher, PhD, giving a lot of research and anecdotes from that research about some differences between boys and girls in an educational setting, is what I'm recalling. And one
Hmm.
such anecdote he gave was that there was a high school girl who signed up for an advanced physics class. And first couple of days of the class, the teacher gave the assignment, go work on these problems. and she was like the only girl in the class. So she went home, started working on it, realized that she didn't understand quite a bit of it, and it was the beginning of the school year because she hasn't learned anything. No one has. But she comes back to the teacher the next day asking for some help, and he says, "Actually, I don't think this class is for you. If you're struggling that early on, if you aren't struggling with the problems and instead are asking me, then this probably isn't for you." What the teacher was missing was that he was used to boys who would just beat their heads against the wall before they'd ask for help. They would suffer
Mm.
unnecessarily
Mhm.
trying to solve
Mhm.
these things that they didn't know how to solve, and then the teacher would come and help them out. He wasn't used to someone who would ask for help that quickly. Maybe you could comment on, again, the power of asking for help.
Well, it's interesting. When you're telling that story, I was reminded in my undergrad work, I was studying business and marketing, and I thought it'd be really cool to have a computer science a minor attached to that. Now,
Mm,
this is way back when. I'm going to date myself, like Fortran, assembler language, all of that, right? And I was struggling, just like the story you're talking about. So I got a tutor, and he really worked with me and he hung in there with me. Finally, he says to me, Celina, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. He goes, I'm not sure your brain is geared to this. Are you happy doing this kind of work? I said, no, I find it torturous.
hmm,
It just like, it was not making me happy. And
mm,
usually when you're happy, you lean into things that you're really good at. And he said, well, I like, I'll just tell you this. You got the problem right, but if you were in the private sector, you would have cost the company thousands of dollars because your loops are so inefficient. And it was true. So I said, you know what? I'm going to drop this major. And I was that minor, and I was really happy. So there's a fine line in mentorship, right? Where you're
mm,
leading someone, but it's like my mother was a jazz singer in New York growing up.
mm,
She tried to get me to sing my whole life. I tried, and I do kind of have a voice, but it's not professional. You got to kind of get a reality check at some point in your life and say, what am I really, really good at? What am I not good at? What doesn't make me happy? And then fill in the gaps, if you will. So, but I do think, like with kids, especially if they want to try something, if this is the only girl in class, right? And
mm,
she's trying, to me, the response would have been, okay, let's sit down and help you figure this out and let her come to the decision of, gosh, this is just not for me. I'd rather go over here. I'm more interested in this, because part of figuring out what you want to do is diving in, getting help, exploring it, right? Just
mm.
like I did in college, but that was not for me. So, yeah, I'm staying to storytelling and marketing. That's my niche.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point because, right, as a mentor, there is a fine line to walk where
Yes,
you
yes.
might see their strengths earlier than they do, and
Hmm.
helping them walk the walk towards it and let it be their own decision can
That's it.
be it can try your patience maybe.
It does. But the mentorship part for me is really having active listening skills. It requires empathy and patience and understanding that this is their journey. I may help be a small part in shaping that and giving them advice when asked, but for the most part, it's their journey. So who
Mm,
am I to judge and say, well, this failure here, I could see it, and they're probably not going to be really great at it. But who's to say that failure doesn't shape them into being who they need to be in life, right? So it's kind of that trust factor there too. And then, of course, when they're beating their head against the wall, it's like, okay, that may be the time to have that kind of conversation with them.
right.
But let
Yeah.
them try. Let them try. Set the bar high and let them try. That's what I say.
I love that. I saw a little skit where someone comes up to their teacher and says, "I want to learn a new skill." And the teacher
Hmm.
says, "Okay, you recognize that for the first while, you're going to be bad at it." And the kid says, "Okay, I don't want to learn a new skill." Because we so eagerly want to just skip to being good
Right.
at things. And
Yes.
one thing I've learned, because as an entrepreneur, as just a professional, there are plenty of things we don't know, and we have to be learning all the time. We have to be gaining skills and experience. But the thing I didn't appreciate or understand until more recently was that it's not a nice to have to play to your values, to play to your strengths. Those are the things that you have to have them if you're going to make it over the long run. Because
Yes.
if you're playing to your weaknesses, if you are living outside of what your values actually are, then you are going to burn out. And I didn't
Yes.
realize that until after I had burnt out and saw, oh wait, I'm not being who I'm supposed to be.
That's right. And it's interesting when I reflect back, when things in my life have seemed easy, like the pathway doesn't have resistance, that tends to be the path that I need to be on. If something doesn't feel right, or I'm having hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, I have to reassess and say, okay, is this what I'm intending to do here? Or, do I need to have another plan? It's like that constant self-reflection of, am I in the right place? And so for me, that's over the years, I've had to have a lot of trust to do that, which is something I didn't grow up with. I didn't trust. If you can't trust your core family unit, then you sort of have to learn that along the way. So, failure to me, or not being successful in it, is just like, how do you take that experience now and learn from it and apply it in your personal and your professional life? That, to me, that's what it's about.
Let's let's line that up with, we've been talking about mentorship from the mentor's perspective, but from the perspective of a mentee, from a learner, I see so many things you just said of being able to trust yourself. How did you learn to trust yourself? What was that journey like?
Wow, that was a lifelong journey, and still is. I think,
Mm,
it's always been about trusting my gut. Like, okay, like I'm very data driven at work. And at the
mm,
end of the day, I still go on my gut level. And I think that skill was honed in an alcoholic environment, because I had to understand when it was safe to be in the house and when it was not safe to be in the house.
mm,
Now that has become my greatest strength and my greatest gift. And I'm so grateful for it, that I was able to heal that past, but it's taken me a long time to get to the gratitude lane instead of being a victim. And one of the things I think that really shifted me right after college, I survived a near rape in college.
wow.
And after that, I thought I was fine, but then a leaf would rustle behind me on campus and I would just freeze. I would lose it. So I had, post traumatic stress disorder, and I didn't really deal with it, but it started affecting every part of my life, every part. And in fear, like I was just frozen in fear. So I found a course. It was a physical course on awakening. It's called Awakening the Warrior Within, with Don Callan. And in this course, it's for women, and they teach you dirty street fighting, and they break you down physically, emotionally, and mentally for 3 days. You're doing things like yelling, which women are not taught to do. You're learning to fight for yourself and stand up. And then at the end of that course, you have to go through 4 rounds with a fully padded 6'2" black belt and take him out, learning the skills that you did. Well, that did it for me. I mean, the first 3 rounds, he got me, but the fourth round, all the training kicked in. And it's kind of like those athletic events where everything slowed down, right? And they had to kind of pull me off of him. But that course shifted me greatly. And from then on out, it wasn't like I was walking around with a false sense of security, but I was okay to be in my own body. So, you kind of, that shifted me. Now, people go through this in many different ways. Some people find their healing in church. Some people find it in meditation. Some people find it in therapy. Some people, but I think that you have to face your personal fears in order to be successful from a business perspective, because it creeps in. I mean, after that experience, I wrote that book, with that Dr. Call, and
Mm.
and started the company and everything. It's like the barriers just melted away, and it was like, no, I am safe. And I had to just learn that, in that one experience. But everybody does it differently. I don't know. How do you trust yourself? How did you get to that place?
Wow. Well, to maybe add contrast to your experience, I've come to a more acute understanding, awareness around the effects I have on others. And
Mm,
at at its best, people see me as a calming or grounding presence in their life. And I never really saw that in myself until people started saying it, because I have plenty of anxieties and worries that all people do. And I've experienced depression and anxiety for about a decade. It's only the last few years that I've been outside of that. And the thing I realized about being able to trust myself is there are going to be some things that people see in you that you don't see in yourself, and you're going to have to think about that, explore it a bit. And when it comes to, in the case of feeling safe in your story, of having that taken from you and then reclaiming it in the way that you did, one thing I realized is that I don't know how consciously I need others to make me feel safe. I'm the one that helps people feel safe. And recognizing that maybe so that's not what I need, but what I need from others is perhaps recognition, just
mm,
acknowledgement here and
mm-hmm,
there. And so when we talk about trusting ourselves, we talk about self-reflection, things like that. It's helped me realize that what others need, the people I'm learning from, and what they're talking about, they're answering their own needs. That's not necessarily mine, and I need to make sure that I'm working towards answering my own. So it may not be I need to feel safe around, because I already do. What I
mm-hmm,
need is people who appreciate that
mm-hmm.
and recognize it and verbalize that. So there's so much there. And I think a common thread that we're talking about here in terms of learning and growing and becoming is self-reflection. So
Yes.
tell me a bit about what your experience has been. I mean, as an entrepreneur, where the that culture, that mindset is do, just move and work. But there's a contrast in self-reflection. How has that played a role in your development?
Huge role. Huge. Again, looking at the personal blocks that I had in my own life, how am I working through those, and then how am I applying those lessons in my
Mm.
companies? That is, I mean, it's everything. So it's taking the time. Like when I mark up my schedule for the month, the first thing I do is I put time for Celina in there.
Mm.
And what does that look like? Well, I live here in San Diego, so it's beautiful. I could go for a walk on the beach or in nature. I literally schedule that time. I schedule the time for, riding my horses, for spending time with my sweet one Dave. Right? It's like, what are all those things? And then work goes around that. Now that doesn't mean I don't work a lot or things. I have a very full life, but I have to take that time, because if I do not, and I do not have that time to reflect, I have a little rituals I do at the end of the day where I may take a bath or just sit in quiet space and listen to some nice, relaxing music, and just be quiet, just breathe, reflect on the day. If I don't do that, I'm a hot mess. I am a hot mess, because I bring in, then I'm not calm. Like you're saying, you have that grounding force. Well, I try to give that to myself every day, right?
Mm.
Coming in, making decisions, working with people, mentorship, whatever I'm doing, so I can be present for people. Like, I know after this interview, I've got a gazillion things going on, but right now, the only thing that matters is Sam. And what are we
Mm.
talking about here? And that type of thing. So that allows me to be present, which allows me to make good decisions and have fun at work and all the other things that fall into place. Now, it wasn't always like that because coming out of survival, right? It was like, I've got to make money. I've got to. So that was like my first
Mm.
motivator. I got to get out of the situation. It's really shifted over the years now to be more of an innovator and empowering people, which is really the mission. I mean, the vision I have is that everybody could get up and go to work and absolutely love what they do and feel like they're contributing, because that would really shift the world, wouldn't it, in that way? So, like, how do I play a small role in that? But that self reflection, boy, it's really critical to everything, to success, I think.
As a man, as a husband, as an outside observer, one thing I've noticed, at least particularly with my wife, is sometimes we avoid solitude and reflection because it's just a whirlwind in our
Yes.
mind.
Yes.
Tell me about your experience in going up against that and turning it into something productive.
I don't resist it. So if I've had a crazy day and maybe things didn't go well, I will sit in my lounging chair and put some music on, and I'll just try to breathe through it. And I acknowledge the thoughts that come up and say, hello. I don't try to resist it. I just let it be. And then I get back to my breath. So I just breathe, and there are a lot of breathing practices out there, but that's always helped me, is just simply to breathe and not resist. And maybe there are times where I sit there and my thoughts are overtaking or whatever. I don't beat myself up about it. It said, okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to try better. It's like giving yourself a break. You're doing the best you can, right? And so that's, to me, it's always been about breath work and relaxation. And then also too, just having other people, like I love to get being an athlete, sports massage and acupuncture and exercise. That's always been a good outlet too, to kind of calm down by the at the end of the day. Just having that work, regular work, that nurturing, whatever that is for you. Some people, it could be, hey, I'm going to have a really great meal and a glass of wine, and that does it for me. Great. Find your own way of doing things. There's not one right way, I think.
No, I appreciate that. And when I first came across the phrase, the teaching that I am not my thoughts, that
Mm.
really challenged me in a lot of ways because we can be so attached to what we're thinking and see it as realer than real.
Yeah.
But when we can detach in a healthy way, then it helps us, it washes over and we can empty our cup and keep moving. So I really appreciate the meditative practices. I know that some people call it a somatic work to
Mm-hmm.
refer
Mm-hmm.
to getting in your body and moving and connecting there. But let me ask you, you talked about walking on the beach, walking in nature, but being with your horses.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your experience with horses. I know my grandmother, she rode equestrian, so
Okay.
that was it's a very interesting and fulfilling hobby.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I've always had animals in my life. I
Mm,
love animals on every level. In fact, one of my motivators to start one of my companies was a cat that I found. I had a dream that I had a cat named Sheldon. The next day, I find this little baby kitty, maybe 2 days old. And I
wow.
was like, oh my gosh, he doesn't look like Sheldon, but this is Sheldon. And he was with me for 19 years. And one of the reasons in part, I started this current company so I could spend time with him at home, which is so funny. So, big motivator. With horses, I grew up, of course, without money to really ride. So I would muck out stalls in exchange for horseback riding lessons, and people would let me borrow clothes to do riding and jumping and all of that kind of stuff. So fast forward now 50 years later, this was literally 2 weekends ago. I started back riding maybe a year and a half ago, and I'm riding every twice a week now. And
Wow.
I, with all the injuries I've had in sports, I can't really jump because it's more
Mm,
risky. But I do just like what they call flat equitation, where you're really being judged on your form and how you ride the horse, etc. So 2 weeks ago, I had on my bucket list that I wanted to get back into a horse show. And 2 weeks ago, I was able to do that. It was just
wow.
fantastic. So I was able, after 50 years, it was like on my Facebook page, total bucket list moment, right? But horses to me are very amazing animals.
Mm,
When autistic children are around them, and I'm working to get certified so I could work with autistic kids on
mm,
horses, their whole demeanor changes. It literally shows you that when you're around horses, your heartbeat tunes in to the horse, and they're remarkable. They really are. So just being around them is like every time I go to the barn, I feel like I'm on vacation because I just
mm,
get to relax and be with the horses, take care of them, and then do the riding and all of that. So everybody should have a hobby like that that makes them feel like present and healing, that type
mm.
of thing. It's just beautiful. So yeah, I've reconnected after all these years.
So that's very interesting. I have a number of mentors who recently was speaking with them, and one of them loves to pilot small aircraft. One of them loves uh, watercraft, his speedboat, and all that.
Yeah.
And they basically told me it's not a matter of if you're going to have an expensive hobby when you're our age. It's a matter of which expensive hobby you're going to have. And so that got me thinking about, okay, what's going to be my expensive hobby? Man, I don't know.
Right,
But life
right.
is long in some respects. Hearing your story of being able to connect and explore something that's been an interest of yours for so long, but not until later in life. And so, sitting here as a millennial, some of us can be
Mhm.
thinking, like, man, like, why haven't I made this or that of myself? And why haven't I
Right.
been able to pursue these interests? Maybe you could speak to the journey of life and how in some ways it can be longer than we think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sam, I didn't find love till I was 60 years old.
Wow.
So went through a tumultuous divorce, but then I found the love of my life on Bumble, of all places, right? And, it just, I think the universe presents things to you that you're ready for. That's the mantra. And it goes back to that level of trust, not only in yourself, but the universe, whatever you want to call the higher power, everybody has their own path, right? But having trust that there's something bigger than ourselves that's guiding us. And I truly believe that. The world is just filled with miracles, and you see
Mm,
them every day. So trusting that the universe is going to put things in front of you that you're meant to have. Nothing is going to pass you by. So, yes, while I wanted to ride horses, and my 40s and 50s, I was right in the middle of like really building the company, and I had other priorities. But I always said, okay, I'm going to get into this. And finally I just pulled the trigger and said, okay, I'm going in. I'm going to start riding horses again. But I do think, having that trust is really important, because we're impatient, right? And it's like, well, why hasn't this happened yet? Why hasn't this happened? Well, there could be a multitude of reasons that are driving that. And that goes for in business and your personal life as well, right? So that's what I think. You got to have trust that whatever the universe is presenting to you is exactly where you need to be.
that is a great assumption to live your life by. And it's sometimes hard. I'm speaking from personal experience because it can still definitely feel like I feel like I've been doing all that I was supposed to, but I'm not as far along as I hope I was. And especially if it has to do with learning new skills. There are so many
Mhm.
different things involved with running a business, building a coaching practice, along with any other set of professional skills. And it can feel like, going back to that little sketch, you're going to be bad at it for a little while. Are you okay
Yep.
with that? Like, no, I guess I'm not. I just want to skip to being good so it can be easy and fun. But again, coming back to living, playing to your strengths and playing to your core values, those are the things that are going to help you get through the the difficult learning that sometimes presents itself along the way. But let me ask you, because we're talking about playing to our strengths, finding the things that mean the most to us. As someone who's built companies, built teams, we talk about finding complementary people to help build things up. What are some of your strengths that cover other people's weaknesses? And then flip it. What are some people who have strengths that are covering your weaknesses across your journey?
Oh my gosh, I have so many weaknesses. So I'll start there. In my personal checkbook, there is something that is called MSW and then a number. MSW stands for mistake somewhere. And it goes back to that story I was telling. Like, I thought I could code computers, do coding. My brain is not wired that way. So
Mm,
I realized that, I started out the company. I said, MSW cannot be in the corporate checkbook. I get this,
mm,
right? Everything has to match to the penny. So I learned more about it. I mean, I got a C in accounting. I was not good at that, but I've got a CPA who explains things to me like dummies. So now
mm,
I'm to the point after 21 years where I can understand a spreadsheet. I can understand the financial documents that are in front of me and what we need to do. I have these other spreadsheets that I use in my company, and my CPA says, Celina, you probably know more about your business using your own methods than how they're presented formally here. But I know I have to have that. So
mm,
that type of skill set. And then I have people on the team who are very detail oriented and fantastic project managers, because I'm dangerous if I start stirring into that. I'm really good at big picture and seeing the strategy, and then I hand it over to the team, after we come up with the strategies collectively. I love working with people on my team and outside of my customers too, because I find it's a very collaborative process. So naturally, I'm surrounded by people who cover my weaknesses, and I'm not in fear of asking the question. It's like, okay, can you help a dummy here explain it to grandma or whatever. So it's just having that levity to say, I don't get it here, and that's okay. For the strengths part of it, I think it goes back to what we were saying, is trusting my gut. Like, I'll
mm,
give you an example. One of my folks brought me a potential opportunity for our company, and this is a startup company, and when I looked into it and did the analysis, there's no doubt that they could have benefited from our customer group in workforce and education. And so I was looking at, a different kind of structure with them, instead of them hiring us, getting percentages of their revenue, things of that nature. So we went kind of round and round on this, and I said I was so clear that we could help them in 4 years get to $49 million in their business, which is a tech company. I said, I'm
mm,
so sure about this that you will not give me this buy-in unless we earn it in these different performance markers, right? So I really tried to think through their situation and say, okay, yeah, I don't want to give somebody part of my company, but if they could do this, what it would be worth for me. And so I kept putting that question to them. We could not come to an agreement on that, and I ended up walking away from that deal, not with any kind of frustration or resentment. It's like, you know what? It's going to be more hassle than it's worth, and even though that would have made our company huge money,
mm,
there wasn't a match there. So it's and they've since come back around. We're still kind of talking, through that, and maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. But I was not afraid to walk away from that deal. It's like the fear factor with me is like, no, guys, it's really not a match. They're lovely people. I see the value in their product and services. There's no doubt that we could help them. And they have to see that. I'm not going to talk them into that because I know the value of who we are. And people
Mm.
were just like, oh my God, where am I going away from this? But it was, so that's my strength, is being able to say, no, it's not the right time, not the right match. Even though from a financial perspective, you got to at this point weigh out everything. Is it going to be a pain? Are you going to enjoy doing it? So that's kind of my strength that I bring to the team. I think it scares them sometimes, but then what happens is, next week I'm like, look at this. We already got this opportunity for this contract. It's a much better match for who we are and what we do. So things like that.
Wow. Yeah, I think so. One of the great skills that one of the hard skills leaders have to learn is being able to make tough decisions, even unpopular decisions. But it sounds like, going back to this theme that's coming up of trusting that the right thing is going to come along, that really helps you stay with your feet planted and assured that you're making the right decision, where some others may not have that same confidence.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that those decisions, I know at the end of the day, I have to make them because I'm the
Mm.
CEO, but I always engage my team, always. So we'll talk about it and I'll say, okay, let's play out this scenario. We get into this deal and then X, Y, and Z happens. What's going to happen over here? So I put it all on the table and then we collectively talk about it. At the end of the day, they saw it was the right thing to do, but I let them be a part of that instead of me just saying, okay, it's my way or the highway, because we are a team, right? And I
Mm.
wanted them to understand, yes, while this could have life altering effects for all of us, at this point, it's just not cooked enough. Maybe they'll come
Mm.
back at a later date.
Yeah.
So we collectively got to that together.
What else can leaders do to build better teams?
For me, it's always about having ownership and letting people have ownership of
Mm.
whatever they're doing and a voice. So we'll get a contract as an example. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a good match. And then I'll come in to the team, we'll have a team meeting and say, this is what I'm thinking. Here's their market. Here's what I'm thinking. Now rip it apart. Please. Because the diversity of thought and the diversity of people on your team is always going to make a better
Mm.
product or service, always, than doing things in a vacuum. And we just have such mad talent that I want to tap into all that. I want to see what they're thinking, what I may be missing. To me, I came into the having a business thinking I had to do everything and be everything and know everything perfectly. That is just not the case. If you can be, and I am vulnerable with my team, like when I say, okay, I'm having an MSW moment, mistake somewhere, or I'm not fully tracking, can you explain this to me like grandma or whatever? They'll break it down for me. And so that I understand it. I'm not afraid of that. It's like, I don't think that is being weak. I think that's being just true. It's being
Mm.
authentic with who you are. And so, yeah, having diversity of thought and letting people have a voice in that. Let's say you have a problem. It's like, okay, we're miscommunicating on this in a big way. We've missed these two deadlines, and we'll bring it up at a team meeting. Why is that? Here was our process. What is happening here? Can y'all help me figure this out? So I don't feel like I'm solving everything. They have ownership in the solution.
I love that. One thing that I became very aware of. Oh, one second.
So cute. Hey,
That happens sometimes. That's my
I
boy.
love it. I love it.
But one thing I learned during my studies at my MBA program was that I learned just enough about every bit of the business to know that I needed experts that actually
Yes.
knew what they were talking about. That there is a skill and there is a valuable skill in being able to talk eloquently, talk enough with the common lingo of different departments. I need to be able to at least know what accounting is talking about. I need to know
Yes.
what marketing is talking about. But I don't have to be able to do what they do. I need
Right.
to be able to bring them together because they're in some ways representing different interests and speaking different languages, but we all need to be working together. So that's where I step in. That's my skill as the leader.
I could see that with you too, that calming presence, and as a facilitator, how that helps you bring teams together. Just facilitating those conversations. You're right. That is what a good leader does.
Hmm. I I joke sometimes where I was starting out early in my career, just an entry level data entry job while I was finishing up my undergrad, and I was reflecting, just confiding in my dad, saying, "Man, I really can't hack it. I really can't hack these entry level things because it's just so mind numbing to me. I really wish I could just start my own thing or enter a company closer at the top, your early stage kind of deal." And my dad, very traditional, love him, but he's like, maybe you should just, pay your dues, take your licks, and you'll work your way up. And I just knew, and I'm not alone in this, that some people just can't hack that path. And so this is something I'm learning about, stepping into leadership by building something from under me.
Yeah, it's a wonderful journey, isn't it? It's you learn so much about yourself and where you need to work, what you need to work on, and your strengths and weaknesses and all of that. It's a
Mm,
great thing, and it is a lifelong journey. I mean, I'll never stop learning. I don't want to stop learning. I don't want to feel like I have arrived. I want to be
mm,
happy. I want to feel I'm contributing. But in order to do that, it's continually learning.
yeah. So my wife and I have a vision and a mission for our own lives and for our listeners to create careers that build our home life rather than compete with it.
Hmm.
What encouragement or lessons learned could you share in that effort?
Yeah, well, to me, that's why entrepreneurship is the best pathway forward. If you have that drive, if you're a worker in a corporate world, a corporate setting, it is a lot to maneuver in that because a lot of companies don't give you the time and space to have a home life, right? I don't like that. I mean, I've been a virtual company for 21 years. People have different motivators. Some is they want to be with their kid, they want to see their kids ballet practice. Some is they want to go to sporting events. Others, they just have different motivators, I would say. So I've always felt it's important to have that flexible work schedule and figure it out. Now, not they can't have the flexible work schedule and not contribute and meet deadlines and all of that. That's the trade-off. If you want to work at 2 in the morning on a project, not a problem, right? But so there's an understanding there and an expectation. Those companies are really hard to find, I think, more and more. Although employers are sort of waking up to that, but for what you're talking about, I think entrepreneurship is the way to go. I mean, it
Mm,
absolutely, you mark your own territory, your own course. You can set it up as a lifestyle company where you only want to work 20 hours a week, or, the gig economy has really brought that focus in. Maybe you just want to work a certain amount. If you really want to build an empire, that's going to take a different path, right? It helps that you have a partner as in your wife who you guys can collectively build that and nurture your kids at the same time. But I really feel work-life balance is critical. You've got to give it to people, and in return they give to you quality work and commitment and stickiness in the company. A lot of employers don't do that. I think it's a mistake.
yeah. With living in a post pandemic world now, I'm very interested to hear you having a virtual company for 2 decades now. What opportunities or what pitfalls do you see these other employers that are waking up to virtual work and that different way of doing things?
Mm. I think the pitfall is they don't trust people, and
Mm,
they've got to set expectations and give them trust. Their accountability, if those things don't happen, it's like, look, we gave you this and this is not happening. That's a different conversation.
Mm.
But people will, if they give them a voice and trust them to do their work, they will step up in return. And I don't think that trust is there. I don't see it in a lot of companies.
Mm. I'll relate this to two of my core values. One is being trustworthy, and the other is
Yes.
trusting others. And I see those as
Yes.
distinct, though, of course, interrelated, because I was briefly married and got divorced. And part of that whole thing was, as much as I was trying to remain trustworthy, without someone giving the trust, then it still doesn't work. And so it's a two-way street in some ways. And I think that when we can approach relationships, there's going to be professional relationships that just we're not getting in people's lives necessarily, but there are boundaries there. But approaching such relationships with generosity and patience helps us not only give trust more fully, but to live up to it as well.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think you have to model the behavior that you want
Mm,
others to show you. Sometimes that comes with having conversations, boundary conversations. It's like,
mm,
okay, this was our agreement. This is not happening, and go from there. What are your thoughts about this? Having that conversation. Conversations can do so many amazing things to open up relationships if we just take the time to understand where that person's coming from and then they understand where you're coming from. Then it can
mm,
create that relationship. I'll tell you, our company, we're like family. I do know. I mean, people have been with us for a long time, and I like that, but I don't know if that's because I'm a Southerner or whatever. I even have customers who've become my good friends and colleagues over the years where we do things, outside of work. And I like that too. So
mm,
because they know they can trust us and, count on us. So I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, but you do have to keep boundaries in mind
mm.
and just set expectations.
Yeah. I'll share that. So I was born and raised in Virginia, so
Okay.
south of the Mason Dixon line, but a little too close to Washington, D.C. So I didn't pick up the accent. And
Right.
yeah, it's funny. So most people ask me, "Where's your accent?" But my wife, being born and raised in Arkansas, funny enough, she doesn't have much of one either, except when she's with relatives. Then it comes out.
That is very true. Yeah, same thing here. I talk to my family, a lot. My sister, my nephews. So they're still in North Carolina. They're still very
Mm,
southern. So it just stays with me.
of course, yeah. Well, and it shines through in the company culture and all that. Like you said, just that southern way of doing things. But to wrap things up, Celina, I appreciate your time. At the Courage Coach for Executives, of course, we focus on embracing fear and moving with courage. So let me ask you, what does courage mean to you?
Yeah, courage means being your authentic self no matter what. So
Mm,
speaking your truth with love and power, right, at the same time, and just being authentic. So that may not be the popular way to go at the time, but just standing in that truth, I think, is really, really important.
I agree. Yeah, it has a lot to do with authenticity, integrity, very
Mhm.
much so. Well, Celina, what hasn't been said yet that needs to be said?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know. I hope people have found one little jewel. When I listen to podcasts and things, I think, gosh, if I get one little jewel out of it, it was worth my time and energy. So hopefully they have found one jewel
Mm,
in here. Of course, not one size fits all. Not everybody's journey is going to be matched and, replicated. But what's the common threads that we can all pull from and learn from? And I've certainly learned a lot today just talking with you and just reflecting on this journey. So thank you for the
mm.
opportunity.
Of course, I've really enjoyed it personally. But as we conclude, Celina, where can people connect with you?
Sure, they can go to our website at fullcapacitymarketing.com. All of our socials are there. We have a blog. We're also just launching a course on called the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs, and we have another one for the Brand Amplifier for Workforce and Education. And it's a online course with coaching on how to really make your brand stand out in the market. So you can check that out under our EFCM Learning Hub on the website.
Excellent. Celina Shands, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Sam. It's been such a pleasure.
Of course. I'm Sam, the Courage Coach for Executives, and remember, it starts with you.